My name is Michael, and I never thought I would ever become afraid of the night. I used to live in a big city, worked at a warehouse, and barely paid attention to the people around me. My life was boring, but peaceful. Everything changed after I was fired. My money was running low, I could no longer afford rent, so I started looking for cheap housing. That's when I stumbled upon an ad for an old house in a small town called Greywood. The price was so low, it seemed suspicious, but I had no choice. When I arrived there, a strange feeling washed over me immediately. The town looked almost deserted. There were few people on the streets, and those I did see acted as if they were constantly in a hurry. Almost every house had bars on the windows and heavy locks on the doors. I remember going into a local store to buy some food. An old man with tired eyes was sitting behind the counter. When he found out that I was moving into the house near the woods, his face changed instantly.
"Will you be living there alone?" he asked. "Yes? Why?" He was silent for a few seconds, then replied quietly, "Don't open the door after sunset, and don't look out the windows if you hear voices." I thought he was just a weirdo. Small towns always have plenty of people with strange stories. I smiled, took my groceries, and drove to the house. The house stood almost on the edge of town. A dense forest began right behind it. The house itself was old, but sturdy. Inside, it smelled of dampness and dust. There was old furniture in the living room, and yellowed photographs of strangers hung on the walls. The first 2 days passed quietly. I tried to clean up the house, unpacked boxes, and even started to think that life was slowly getting better. On the third night, everything changed. I was sitting in the kitchen, watching a video on my phone, when I heard a strange sound outside. It was as if someone was walking around the house, slowly, carefully. At first, I thought it was some kind of animal, but then I heard heavy breathing. A chill ran down my spine. I stood up and went to the window. It was dark outside, only the faint light of a street lamp illuminated the yard. And then I saw it. A tall creature was standing near the shed. It was so thin that you could see its ribs beneath its gray skin. Its arms hung almost to the ground, and its head was unnaturally elongated. The eyes were the most terrifying part. They were completely black. It stood motionless, staring right at me. I froze. There was only one thought in my head. This is not a human. After a few seconds, the creature slowly tilted its head to the side, as if examining me. Then, it took a step toward the house. I abruptly backed away from the window and closed the curtains. My heart was pounding so hard that it became difficult to breathe. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was some kind of joke. Someone just decided to scare the new guy. But suddenly, there was a thud on the door. I flinched. Then another one. Someone was trying to get inside. The voices in the dark. I grabbed a kitchen knife from the table and slowly walked into the hallway. The house was so silent that I could hear my own breathing. And then a voice rang out. "Michael, we are hungry." I felt my legs turn to jelly. It knew my name. The voice sounded unnatural. It was as if several people were speaking at the exact same time. I quickly backed away and pulled out my phone to call the police, but there was no signal. At that exact second, the lights in the house went out. Darkness consumed everything around me. I heard something moving slowly right outside the door. And then, someone began to laugh right beneath my window. It was not a human laugh. And that was the exact moment I realized that the old man's warning from the store was not a joke. I stood in the middle of the pitch-black kitchen, gripping the knife so tightly that my hand ached. Outside, someone was walking around the house, and each step echoed in my head louder than any sound. I tried to think rationally. Maybe they are humans. Maybe they just want to scare me. But inside, I already knew the truth. A human cannot speak like that. A human cannot have eyes like that. And a human certainly cannot make everything around them freeze as if the night itself was afraid to move. I slowly backed away from the door and locked the kitchen. Then I barricaded it with the table, though I knew perfectly well if something wanted to get inside, this table wouldn't stop it. The house was quiet. I could only hear my own breathing and the pounding of my heart. My phone was almost dead, so I only turned on the flashlight for a few seconds. The light cut through the darkness, revealing old, cracked walls and photographs on a shelf. One of them showed a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. They were all smiling. But something else terrified me. The eyes. Every single person in the photo had completely black eyes. I abruptly lowered the phone. A heavy pressure clamped down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps came from upstairs. I froze. Someone was definitely on the 2nd floor. Slowly, almost soundlessly, I stepped out into the hallway. The stairs were swallowed by darkness. It felt as though the dark had grown thicker than before. I didn't want to go up there. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to run out of this house right now. But the front door was on the other side of the hallway. And between it and me, something was now standing. I heard a soft laugh from above. Then, a child's voice. "Michael, come to us." Everything inside me turned to ice. I slowly climbed a few steps and pointed the phone's light forward. At first, I saw nothing. And then, a figure appeared at the end of the hallway. It was small. It looked like a child. It was standing with its back to me. It wore a filthy white shirt, and its arms hung unnaturally long by its sides. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. The figure slowly turned its head. Its mouth was far too wide, so wide that the skin on its cheeks looked torn open. Inside, sharp, needle-thin teeth were visible. And those same black eyes. The creature was smiling. My breath caught in my throat. It suddenly leaned forward as if it was about to charge at me.
I instinctively bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping. Behind me, I heard the thudding of bare feet. It was running after me.
I burst into the living room and slammed the door to the first-floor bedroom. I locked it and pressed my back against the wall. Outside the door, it went quiet. Too quiet. Only my own heavy breathing broke the silence. About 10 seconds passed. Then, I heard something slowly scratching the door from the other side. Not hard, as if it was playing a game. I backed away toward the window and parted the curtain just a bit. I wish I hadn't. 3 more were standing in the yard. 3 tall, gaunt creatures were staring straight at the house. And then, one of them raised its head and whispered, "He still doesn't understand." At that exact second, the bedroom door began to slowly swing open. I was certain I had locked it. The same child stood in the dark doorway. It wasn't smiling anymore. Its mouth opened so wide it seemed impossible for a living thing. And then I heard a voice, but this time it echoed directly inside my head. "You stepped into our forest, Michael, and now you belong to us." I rushed to the window, smashed it with a chair, and leapt outside. The shattered glass cut my hands and face, but I didn't even feel the pain. I just ran into the darkness, ran as far away from that house as possible. But when I reached the road, I realized the worst part. My car was gone. Instead, one of those creatures was standing right in the middle of the road. It was much taller than the others. Its head almost touched the tree branches, and in its hands it was holding something that looked like a human head. When the creature took a step toward me, I screamed in terror for the first time in my life and ran straight into the forest. Branches whipped against my face, and my feet slipped on the wet ground. But I didn't stop. Behind me, I could hear the heavy breathing of those creatures. Every now and then, their black eyes flashed between the trees. I no longer knew where I was running. The forest was so dark that my phone was barely helping. The flashlight's beam trembled in my hand, and the battery was on its last remaining percentages. I tripped over a root and collapsed into the mud. Breathing was difficult. I could taste blood in my mouth. From behind, that voice echoed once again. "Michael, don't run away." It sounded closer now. I scrambled up and kept running. At some point, the trees began to thin out, and I noticed a light ahead. An old house. A small wooden cabin was standing in the middle of the forest. The windows were boarded up, but a faint yellow light filtered through from inside. I rushed to the door and began to pound on it. "Open up, please!" For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, the door slowly opened. An old man with a shotgun in his hand stood on the threshold. The very same store clerk. He silently dragged me inside and quickly secured the door with several locks. The cabin smelled of smoke and old wood. A lamp burned on the table, and all the windows were tightly shut. "I warned you," he said quietly. I could barely stand on my feet. "What are those creatures?" The old man sat heavily on a chair and remained silent for a few seconds. "They have lived in this forest for a very long time, long before the town even appeared here. People call them the Nightborn.
Are they some kind of animals? He shook his head. No, they used to be human. A chill ran down my spine. The old man continued. Many years ago, a group of people vanished in the forest. They searched for them for weeks, but found only one boy. He was alive, but he was no longer human. That night, he killed his entire family. A few days later, others began to disappear. I tried to process his words, but my mind was in utter chaos. Why are they hunting me? The old man looked me straight in the eyes. Because you entered their home. That house near the woods has been cursed for a long time. Everyone who lives there eventually becomes like them. At that moment, something shifted outside. The old man instantly grabbed his shotgun and extinguished the lamp. "Quiet," he whispered. I froze. Behind the wall, someone was walking around the cabin. Slowly, as if savoring the terror inside. Then, a child's voice rang out. "Give us Michael." My hands began to shake. The old man loaded his shotgun. They won't come in as long as the sun isn't shining. No, they won't come in until sunrise. But morning is still a long way off. I noticed that he wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at me. "What is it?" I asked quietly. He remained silent. Then he slowly stepped closer. "Show me your hand." "Why?" "Show it." I lifted my hand and froze. On my skin, near the wrist, were black veins. Thin, dark lines were slowly crawling beneath my skin. My mouth went dry. "No." The old man lowered his eyes. "They've already infected you." A strange noise began to ring in my head. It felt as though dozens of voices were whispering all at once. I clutched my head and fell to my knees. Strange images flashed before my eyes. The dark forest, black eyes, human bodies between the trees. And then I heard them, clearly, right inside my head. "Come back to us." I screamed and pressed my hands to my ears, but the voices only grew louder. The old man slowly raised his shotgun. I looked at him and understood everything. "No, please." There was no anger in his eyes, only pity. "I'm sorry, boy. Otherwise, they'll take the whole town." At that exact second, the cabin door shook violently. A terrifying roar echoed from outside. The old man was distracted for a split second, and right then, I felt a hunger. Not an ordinary hunger. Something inside me wanted to break free. I saw the skin on my hands beginning to darken, and my fingers growing longer. The old man stepped back in terror. "No, it's too fast." I raised my eyes to a mirror near the wall and saw myself. My eyes had turned completely black, and outside the cabin, dozens of creatures were already waiting for me to join them.